Imagine this. Billionaire's baby wouldn't stop crying on the plane until a quiet girl stood up. And what seems at first glance like a simple, heartwarming story is actually a complex moral case study that unfolds in layers of human behavior, societal expectation, and the subtle power dynamics of wealth and attention. Picture a transatlantic flight filled with exhausted passengers, the hum of jet engines masking a rising tension, as the inconsolable wails of a baby echo down the cabin, fraying nerves and drawing sideways glances from everyone on board. The infant, swaddled in designer fabrics and carried by a figure whose very presence exudes untouchable privilege, seems to embody not just a moment of parental struggle but the larger narrative of entitlement and societal gaze. Passengers clutch their armrests, flight attendants exchange knowing looks, and in this enclosed metal tube hurtling at 35,000 feet, a microcosm of human psychology begins to unfold, a case that challenges assumptions about compassion, intervention, and the invisible threads of social hierarchy. And then, in the midst of this escalating tension, a quiet, unassuming girl, almost invisible by societal standards, unremarkable in wealth, status, or outward confidence, stands up, and her action, small as it may appear, sets in motion a series of reactions that will reveal not only the fragility of privilege under pressure but the extraordinary impact of deliberate empathy. From this singular moment, we are invited to dissect a systemic puzzle. Why does society instinctively defer to the powerful? How do norms of public behavior shape moral responsibility? And what happens when someone who is typically overlooked challenges the expected order of events? This is not merely a story about a crying baby or a compassionate act. It is a case file of human interaction, a live experiment in observation, influence, and the latent moral economy of an airplane cabin. And it asks the viewer to confront a deeper question: who truly has the power to change a situation? And how often do we underestimate the quiet, the overlooked, and the seemingly powerless? The conflict emerges not just from the incessant cries of the billionaire's baby, but from the collision of human expectations, social pressure, and moral responsibility that grips the cabin like an invisible vice. Each passenger becomes a case study in micro-behavior. Some avert their eyes, preferring avoidance over engagement. Others fume silently, calculating the social risk of confrontation versus the emotional toll of continued exposure. And flight attendants, trained for protocol but human in their fatigue, oscillate between polite intervention and frustrated resignation. At the center of this storm is the baby, whose crying transcends mere discomfort to become a trigger for latent anxieties and social hierarchies. How wealth shields individuals from scrutiny, how power manifests in entitlement, and how those without privilege are conditioned to remain passive observers. The parents themselves, accustomed to immediate compliance from the world around them, interpret the disturbance as a minor inconvenience rather than a crisis, failing to recognize the moral weight carried by their inaction. And it is within this crucible that the conflict crystallizes. A quiet girl, socially invisible and unthreatening, is confronted with the ethical dilemma of whether to intervene, challenging both her own internalized limitations and the external structures that dictate when, how, and why ordinary people act in public spaces. Here lies the systemic tension: privilege versus empathy, action versus inertia, and the invisible calculus each observer performs when faced with a problem that is technically solvable but socially fraught, setting the stage for a moment that will irrevocably disrupt the expected flow of human behavior aboard this airborne microcosm. The climax erupts with a tension so palpable it almost feels like the cabin itself holds its breath. As the quiet girl kneels slightly, speaking in a measured, soothing voice that cuts through the cacophony of the baby's wails, each syllable carefully calibrated to calm rather than overwhelm, revealing a remarkable understanding of infant psychology and emotional resonance that contrasts sharply with the parents' flustered and ineffective attempts at comfort. Passengers watch in stunned silence as the baby's cries, once relentless and piercing, begin to modulate, the shrill intensity giving way to curious, tentative coos. And it becomes immediately clear that this intervention, humble, unassuming, and devoid of any social grandstanding, has fundamentally shifted the dynamics of the cabin. The billionaire parents, initially defensive and puzzled, now observe with a mixture of astonishment and reluctant admiration, their perceived authority momentarily destabilized by someone who, by societal measures, should have no influence in this arena. Around them, a subtle moral awakening occurs. Passengers recognize that hierarchy and wealth are not absolute determinants of efficacy or impact, that quiet competence can outweigh ostentatious power, and that empathy combined with knowledge can alter even the most rigidly structured environments. Flight attendants, previously poised for procedural intervention, now step back, acknowledging that the solution has emerged organically, driven not by protocol or authority but by the precise, deliberate action of an overlooked individual. And in this peak moment, the cabin becomes a laboratory of human behavior, a microcosm in which courage, emotional intelligence, and ethical initiative converge to produce a resolution that is as profound socially as it is psychologically, leaving every observer privileged and ordinary alike reassessing their assumptions about agency, influence, and the transformative power of understated action. Asterisk. The resolution unfolds as the cabin gradually returns to a semblance of normalcy, but the impact of the quiet girl's intervention continues to reverberate in subtle, enduring ways, illustrating the cascading consequences of a single morally decisive action. The baby, now soothed and attentive, nestles against its parent, who finally demonstrates a grudging acknowledgement of the girl's effectiveness, a moment of humility that punctures the veneer of entitlement and illustrates that authority without insight is inherently fragile. Passengers, who had been silently measuring the social stakes of their own potential interventions, experience a collective cognitive shift, an unspoken acknowledgement that courage and empathy are not reserved for the socially prominent, but may emerge from the most unexpected sources, challenging entrenched assumptions about influence and responsibility. Flight attendants resume their duties with a renewed sense of respect, not only for the girl's composure but for the latent human capacity to alter outcomes when conventional structures fail, while whispers of admiration ripple discreetly through the cabin, reinforcing a shared lesson in the power of observation, initiative, and ethical action. Even the billionaire parents, often insulated from external judgment, are confronted with a rare mirror reflecting the limitations of their privilege, and the encounter leaves a quiet, transformative imprint on all present, a moral recalibration that underscores the latent potential for individual agency to disrupt patterns of inertia and social hierarchy. What seemed like a fleeting episode of public inconvenience now emerges as a case study in human behavior, a tangible demonstration of how empathy, intelligence, and deliberate action can penetrate barriers of wealth, authority, and expectation, leaving an indelible mark on the social microcosm of a crowded airplane, and offering a compelling blueprint for understanding how ordinary individuals can catalyze extraordinary outcomes. Asterisk. The conclusion brings into focus the universal truth embedded within this singular episode, revealing that the real lesson extends far beyond the confines of a crying baby or an airplane cabin. It is a study in the transformative power of quiet courage, moral clarity, and deliberate action in the face of social expectation and structural hierarchy. This incident demonstrates that influence is not the exclusive domain of wealth, status, or authority, but resides equally in those who possess awareness, empathy, and the willingness to act when circumstances demand it, even when the odds suggest their voice might go unheard. Asterisk. The call to action flows naturally from this conclusion, urging viewers to recognize that the lessons of this airborne moral case extend directly into their own lives, and that just as the quiet girl's deliberate intervention reshaped the cabin's dynamics, each of us holds the potential to influence our surroundings through mindful, courageous action. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to engage. Subscribe to the channel to ensure you don't miss future deep dive investigations that dissect human behavior and societal dynamics with the same rigor. Hit the like button to signal your appreciation for narratives that challenge conventional assumptions. Ring the notification bell so you are alerted the moment new stories unravel. And leave a comment sharing your thoughts on how empathy, courage, or small actions have shifted the course of events in your own life. Your engagement not only supports the channel but also becomes part of the broader conversation about human potential, ethical responsibility, and the transformative power of understated yet deliberate interventions, reinforcing the central message that no one is too quiet, too small, or too overlooked to make a profound difference when the moment demands action.